wanted to control their destiny, and in many cases they had an idea about how to do something better. So, for example, we've had people work for us in our home that were immigrants that came over, and they ring the doorbell and they say, "I'd love to get some work. I'll take care of your lawn and trees and bushes and yard and all that sort of thing." And so then we hire them. And then when they do a great job, if they do a great job, then your neighbors start asking you, "Who's doing your yard?" And then you say, "Pablo, el jardinero," right, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then pretty soon they hire them, and pretty soon it spreads like viral. Then pretty soon Pablo, the jardinero, original jardinero, is now having to hire more people, because it's not just him and his son and daughter, but it's now, other people. Pretty soon he has to buy more trucks. Pretty soon he has to buy more equipment. And pretty soon he's almost doing the whole neighborhood. And guess what? Now he's making really good money, and he's employing people, but he had to take risk of ultimately hiring the people, take risk in terms of buying trucks, right, and equipment.
Right.
And so you take risks. Sometimes some people say, "Oh, I don't want to do that because I don't want to have another car payment, or I don't want to have 5 car payments, or I don't want to, whatever, so I better wait and save up, so when I have enough cash to buy it." And then what happens is you don't get the next job because you weren't ready or you couldn't do it, right?
Right.
And pretty soon your rate of expansion is different. So it's that appetite. And it's also about software, writing software and competing with people where some people say, "Oh, I could never write software that's the same as, some company that's supplying, Quicken or, Amazon or whatever." And the answer is now there's more and more Latinos, Latinas that are getting there. And that's because they have now thought about what they could do to differentiate. And then they've taken the risk, made the investment of their time, their money, and then maybe leveraging it with other people's money.
Right. Another principle for leadership is differentiate.
Yeah, for me, that's the holy grail. Because if all you do is do the same as everybody else, you're almost making yourself a commodity. But when you do things bigger, better, faster, etc., back to the customer experience, people pay you for the value of whatever it might be. And, it's like now in the movie theater business. Theaters that are just like the old theaters of the past, and you pay, $15 for a ticket to go in. And then there's these new theaters that give you reclining seats, they bring you food, all that. And so rather than just spending $15, you end up spending $80, for the tickets, the food, and the drinks, and all that kind of stuff. And their ROI is much higher than the one that, was still doing it the old way. And that's because they provided a differentiated experience, for their consumer, and not everybody can afford it. So they know who their consumer is. They only do it in probably neighborhoods where it makes sense. And so they differentiate that way. It's like cars. How are you differentiating in today's world? And, we've evolved through many stages of that. Cars that had the first air conditioning, cars that had the first power windows, cars that had the first, cruise control, first, et cetera. And now you're getting cars that are now really just mobile devices, right? Because you can do almost anything inside your car because they have Wi-Fi, they have bandwidth, they have all kinds of stuff, and it continues to evolve. And so people will buy, based on different factors, maybe than they used to buy 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Right. Very interesting. Now, I have a question. Going back to you, to Sol, is there a habit you have that you consider fundamental in your personal growth and that it helps you deal with the pressure of your daily life?
Well, I would say almost anybody that knows me would say I'm very competitive, right?
Yeah.
I'm a competitive. So I love it. I relish it. So that's number one. Number two, so that's a characteristic. Number two is I'm a believer of preparation, right?
Right.
So I'm a voracious reader. I read stuff from the industries that I've worked in and have led companies in, and I read from other industries, other sectors. I read about Brazil. I read about, Nigeria. I read about Romania. I read about not just the U.S. So I'm always curious. I want to know more. I never know enough.
How many hours you read a day, or what average?
How many hours?
Right.
The hours are really a function of, how much free time I can free up. So I travel a lot, so I read a lot when I'm traveling, or when you're waiting for the airplane, or
Right.
or whatever, or sometimes at night while you're watching maybe some TV show, you're also double tasking by
Right.
reading something while you do it.
It happens. But it's so interesting because, to read is so important to shape your life, because now the access to information is so unlimited, so huge as ever before in the history of mankind. Bill Gates says something like this, and many others. But I mean, we have so many sources of information and education and growth, and we have to use it. But many people don't have that habit of reading and enlarging or expanding their universe. Correct?
Yeah, and so some people have coined the phrase, you're a forever, you should be a forever student, right? Always wanting to learn more. And that's really my mantra, is I never know enough. And the minute I think I know as much as I need, that's probably the day that I will die.
I totally agree. That's awesome. If you have let's say that Los Angeles is a huge city. If we give you a billboard in the busiest corner of town, which message would you put on it so people that see it can get inspired?
Well, I think, for me right now, and sometimes this becomes moments in time, is that to me the billboard should say, I value all people. Because one of the things that we're having now is this, what I call a digital civil war in the United States, where we have a president that is wanting to purge the country of people that are not, let's call it, of Anglo stock. And it came from his comment when the leader of Norway came, and he asked her, why aren't there more people, why don't we have more people from Norway as immigrants in the United States?
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
And it exemplified a viewpoint, which is not the right viewpoint, because today I am speaking a lot about what I call the new mainstream economy. And today, if you look at our country, and you look at most of the biggest companies in our country, their domestic business and growth is tied predominantly now to the U.S. Latino cohort. And so as a guy that's run companies around the world, as a guy that has always looked for growth in order to create value, it always ultimately comes from customers. If I have no customers, I cannot grow. If I have a decline in customers, I'm going to decline. But if I keep on getting more and more customers, I can grow. And if I have customers that replace old customers, I can grow. So part of the demographics of our United States of America, the die has been cast by birth rates. And about, my generation, the baby boomer generation, in total basically has not birthed children, so that this generation essentially replaces itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a result, we now have labor shortages in this country, and their labor shortages are going to get even greater as the next 5 to 10 years occur, and it's going to stunt growth opportunity in the United States. It's going to make GDP growth of 3% or even 2.5% extremely difficult, if not possible at all, because you need workers creating outputs of goods and services, and you need workers who are making income so that they can be consumers. And because companies have customers, they keep on investing. And those are the components essentially of GDP. And if you have one of the major drivers of both labor supply and driver of consumption, and that goes to essentially zero or net negative, you have an economy that is looking like Italy, looking like Japan has looked. And that's not what any of us as citizens of this country want. And me, being an American who cares about my country, which is the United States of America, I'm on a mission right now to help educate as many people about how we need to value all people, because everybody's contributing. We need all people to be contributing so that everybody's children, whether they're Latino, Anglo, Asian, Black, everybody's children and their grandchildren will have the kind of country that I grew up in and that I want to see for them.
That's so true. And you have my support on that one. I mean, I was listening so carefully to what you were explaining, and it's so, so true. And before we finish, and thank you so much for taking this call. I know you were driving and you were cutting traffic in some place in between San Diego and Los Angeles. Thank you so much for that. The last question would be, what would be your best possible advice to young entrepreneurs that want to, launch a business or make their ideas to become true?
Well, I think if you want to be entrepreneurial, you have to find problems that haven't been solved or situations that need improvement. And then behind that is that there are customers that are willing to pay for a new solution, right? Meaning around a problem that hasn't been solved, or around a situation that could generate, real value because you're improving a process, you're improving a way to do business, you're increasing productivity, whatever it might be. And people are willing to pay for it because it creates value. So the core idea is, look, number one, if you're going to start a business, think about, does it create value? Can you differentiate? And then, is it solving a problem that others are not solving, or you're creating something brand new? Then the second part B is, and are you willing to work as hard as you need to make it successful, to work the hours, to be the person always looking and reading and learning and studying so that you can keep on making it better literally every day? And are you the kind of person that when you ultimately start hiring people to work for you, that you're willing to lead by example? You'll be willing to work harder. You'll be willing to prepare more. You'll be willing to essentially engage and take the risks that are required, both financial, time, and also sometimes the value challenges that people have in terms of how they make their choices. That's really my advice that, says, okay, if you're willing to do all the above, go for it. And go for it with, real ganas in terms of whatever the idea is that you have. Because it's going to be so fun when you're pursuing a dream, an idea, an aspiration that you personally have had. And that's fun. Trust me. I've done startups, run big companies. I've not just done them in what I call in the hood, So I'm not somebody that was born in the United States and only ran United States companies.